I've been thinking a lot about a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, "What we fear the most is usually what we need to do the most." What does that mean? What we fear the most is usually what we need to do the most. Think about something in the past that you have feared. Bring the occasion to mind, and then is there a time when you did the thing that you were afraid of? How did you feel after you did that thing? And think of another time in the past where you feared something, or something currently that you fear that you are not doing, that you are avoiding. What does it feel like to avoid it because of the fear? For me, it's in doing the things that I fear, there's freedom on the other side. And usually this feeling of, I can do this thing that I was afraid of doing. So it's no longer a monster. It's no longer this thing that I can't do. It's one more thing in my life that I can do. In particular, what's coming to mind for me is public speaking. I teach meditation at different schools and corporations and organizations, and sometimes there's 30 to 70 people in the room when I'm teaching, and that's something that I used to be afraid of. But in facing that fear, it's become less of a monster, and there's still, butterflies when I stand in front of a large group of people, usually in the beginning, and then once I get going, I kind of get in a rhythm. But it was first fear, and then, conquering that fear by doing what it is I'm afraid of. So Ralph Waldo Emerson said, what we fear the most is usually what we need to do the most. Another example I think of is, think of something that you haven't said to somebody, that you want to say. Whether it's a difficult thing, or that you love them, or somebody's been bothering you and you can't muster up the courage to say it. It's like, what we fear the most is what we need to do the most, meaning we're afraid of this thing and it'll stay with us in our experience if we continue to avoid it because of fear. The alternative is to address it, and usually there's a freedom on the other side of that. So what stops us from acting in that face of that fear? I think part of it is, some of it's unconscious, like we don't even know the fear is there. And that's where these questions can be helpful, stopping and reflecting on, what am I afraid of right now? Is there something in my life that I'm not saying to someone, or something I'm not doing? Do I want to talk to my boss about something, or do I want to change my job? Do I want to not be in this relationship anymore? What's keeping me from acting? So there's asking these questions, which brings them to mind, but then there's also a benefit in sitting with them. So sitting with them in, one of the teachers I have learned from, Adyashanti, he calls it meditative inquiry, meaning sitting in meditation, so finding a place where you will sit and either focus on the breath or focus on something to bring you to a meditative state, and then in that meditative state, entering these questions. So we would sit, what it would look like is if we would sit for 10, 20 minutes, whatever, and get to a place where we're not trying to change anything and we're in a meditative state, and then enter this question, what am I afraid of? And then not answering it with thought, but just sitting with those questions in a state of meditation, so meditating on these questions. So it could help bring awareness. What am I afraid of? Maybe it hadn't come to a conscious level. Maybe I'm just afraid of something in my life, but I haven't really thought about it consciously. And if we bring it to a conscious level, then maybe we can act on it. And then there's another level of, okay, it's in my conscious realm. I'm aware of this fear, but I'm not acting on it. And then there might be other cognitions that are getting in the way. So like for me with public speaking, what I'm afraid of is failing. What does that mean? So here's another question. We can follow these questions. I'm afraid. Okay, what am I afraid of? Failing. What does failing mean? Failing means, I guess in the past to me it meant like stuttering on my words, or the people not being engaged, or the people not caring about what I am talking about. But when I look at that more closely, like, is that failure? And where I'm at now is, it's more of, if the person is not engaged in mindfulness, maybe that's just not their thing. Maybe they like football. Maybe they like motorcycles. And it's not a personal thing. And also stuttering on my words is like, okay, that happens. People stutter on their words. So it's kind of like a simple answer, but I have to follow the questions through. I'm afraid. What am I afraid of? Failing. What does that mean? Stuttering on my words. Is that really a failure? No, because all humans do that. Okay. So then I'll stand up and I'll speak in front of these people. So maybe following those questions for yourself. What am I afraid of? Maybe for you it's failure as well. What does that mean? What does it mean to fail? And is your idea of what it means to fail, is that true in reality? Is that actually failing? And then, like the quote, what we fear the most is usually what we need to do the most. When we work through these things and work through our fears, then we're no longer holding on to them. And when we're no longer holding on to them, there's a freedom that comes from that. I think of, there's a movie from 2008 called Man on a Wire. There was a tightrope artist. His name was Philippe something. Petit, maybe Philippe Petit. But he was a tightrope artist. And true story, he walked across a tightrope between the Twin Towers. He snuck into the Twin Towers, I think it was in the 70s or 80s, and he had somebody on his team shoot a bow and arrow across the buildings and tie a rope between the two buildings, and he walked across it. And talk about facing your fears and what's on the other side of that. And he talks about the freedom and the beauty of how it was a pure experiential moment when he's on this tightrope looking at the world from that vantage point. So this is like a practical example of how when we face our fears, there can be beauty in seeing the world from the other side of that. I think we can do the same thing internally. So by facing our fears internally, we can change our perception and see the world from a different vantage point that has more beauty. Okay. So if you listen to the podcast on iTunes, it would be helpful if you can give me a rating for my own understanding of how people are receiving it, and for other listeners to have some collective feedback. Okay, take care.